So, as many of you who follow me will know, I went on a rather unexpected and last-minute trip to the United States and the UK recently. And because it happened so quickly, I really didn't have time to finish some of the vlogs that I had shot, some of the material I had shot. So you'll notice that the seasons have changed, those of you paying attention. But nevertheless, I'm going to try and get through some of the material that I shot at the tail end of summer before now autumn, fall has settled in. This particular vlog is about something I've been wanting to talk about for quite some time. And it's not a vlog, it's an interview. So, take it for what it is. It's kind of anecdotal. This is just one person's opinion, one person's perspective. But there's a vast group, thousands and thousands of foreigners who have come to this country to try and aid as best they can. And in Ukrainian, it falls under this very large umbrella of volunteeri. Now, they don't generally talk about soldiers that have come over to fight as volunteeri, but anybody else is in that category, whether they're doing medical assistance, logistics, getting in ammunition or weaponry, cars, even just, warm clothing, that sort of thing. There's that. There are the people who are here, participating in financial support. There are people here who are supporting in terms of governance and communication and all sorts of different fields, but all fall under this blanket of the Ukrainian word volunteeri. And so again, this is anecdotal, but I wanted to sit down with one of these people and delve into the mind, a mentality that I've seen not just from her, but from many others. So this is a step into the motivation and the mind of the volunteer. More and more support. I first became aware of Rima through social media, it being the modern world we live in, and her commentary and her assessment and her daily question, what are you doing for Ukraine today? She left a comfortable life in Chicago and came here to Kiev, despite the danger and the difficulty.
Yeah. I'm certified.
Obvious question to start things off. Why come to Ukraine?
So my journey with Ukraine is quite a story. I'm Lithuanian by ethnic roots. Mm-hmm. So we have a family history of what Russian occupation did to our family. We are refugees from World War II. My great-grandmother was born in Dnipro, so I have some roots and attachments to it. And so I stayed up all night. The night of the invasion, I was just on Twitter reading everything and just going, yep, this is it, full scale is coming. Mm-hmm. I was still working in the finance industry at that time, but what I was then doing was jumping into the humanitarian aid side of things, and making sure that I was part of a couple organizations. I'm also a Rotarian. I helped coordinate several efforts to get a lot of humanitarian aid over between the disaster relief section of Rotary in our Chicago area, and also just all these other Ukrainian organizations. We all kind of banded together and got tons of medical aid, tons of humanitarian aid. And we were procuring non-lethal military aid for the military and also medical aid. Mm-hmm. And then I started coming in country in September to bring it myself and hand deliver it, see what the front line was like from a civilian perspective, to be able to then bring that back to continue the advocacy work in Washington, because those perspectives are just not available to DC officials. Civilians on the ground, what we see, what we hear, things like that. So it was a way to kind of also help with aid packages, whatever information that we could provide. Worked for another NGO, and then decided to go back to my roots when I started university, which was pre-med, because for me, I feel that the next way that I can help Ukraine is by becoming a medic. Mm-hmm. Why Ukraine? From a personal perspective, from my family history, we know what Russian occupation is like. Yeah. My great-grandparents died never seeing their homeland again. And I never wanted to see any other country suffer that same fate. So I wake up every morning motivated by that, because they literally died within 3 years before Lithuania regained its independence. So that is probably one of the central driving forces on a personal note. As an American, it's our job to protect the freedom and the rights of others. We are all about democracy. We're all about freedom. You know, we are the ones that are the shining example. We're supposed to be. We've always been those people. And to come here because that's what we want to do is help preserve the freedom and dignity and self-determination of another nation that's being provoked. You know,
where do you make the change between advocating back in the States and physically coming over here? Not only that, deciding to be a combat medic ultimately, getting as close as I'm sure you do occasionally to the zero line. Where does that transition happen?
Well, it happens when you're not feeling like you're making the most amount of effective change sitting behind a desk to raise a couple bucks here and there. Just people who are letting me know what are the current injuries at the front, because I supply medical aid. So what they need, you know, we're seeing a lot of amputation due to landmines. Stepping on landmines is probably one of the biggest injury problems. We're seeing a lot of amputation injuries, a lot of shrapnel injuries, tons of shrapnel injuries, because it's all artillery in those trenches. So you need mainly stop the bleed stuff, all the stuff like tourniquets, Celox, wound bandages.
And Celox, is that the dry,
the granules that are on the bandage that you stuff in, and it stops the bleeding. Yeah. So you need a lot of it. You mentioned all the things there that you need. How well supplied are the armed forces of Ukraine right now when it comes to medical? Not well enough. I know entire battalions that go out without IFAKs.
And an IFAK is just a first aid unit.
A first aid kit, but it's got your tourniquet, it's got your bleed stop, your Celox, it's got your bandage, it's got your, if some of them have it, a decompression needle for tension pneumothorax. So like these are all the things that will save your life. They don't, if they get them. So one of the things that we've always, like that I was doing with an NGO, is we would consistently try to supply IFAK kits, because that was number one. So at least the soldier, when the medic gets to them, can take their personal IFAK off of them and use it.
Right.
Because medics only have a finite amount of materials as well. There's
only so much you can carry.
Exact that, but also get as well, because I'm in several logistics groups for medical supplies. You know, we have to constantly replenish. Traumatic brain injuries everywhere. Yes. Concussions are a constant issue, and they don't get enough time off to recover from these concussions. Like, that's another problem. So, I mean, it's getting better. They're getting a little bit more time off, but you know, previously they weren't getting as much time for these concussive injuries. And you're right, if it doesn't liquidate your insides, you're very lucky. You know, again, the crush injuries in your pelvis are almost guaranteed.
And the sheer volume of munitions that are being dropped.
It's constant. I get videos from my friends all the time. One hit, 30 seconds later, second hit. Sometimes it's 15 seconds in between. I mean, I've been shelled as well. Like, it's a lot to deal with.
Do you lose heart?
No. And I'll tell you why. Because the mission is greater than the bullshit.
Yeah.
I get mad. Like, believe me, I get pissed off. You've seen my Twitter. I get pissed off all the time. But if I leave or if I walk away, then they win. Yeah. And that is one thing I can't abide. If I go back home with saying, "Oh, you know, fuck this. I'm sick of these, you know, people, whatever," then they win. And Russia wins and we lose.
We lose big time.
And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I think we fail as a nation to see that this is a global conflict.
Yes.
It's not just here. So when people say this is not our war, we shouldn't be there, I'm like, number one, there's so many global implications. If Russia wins, then they are walking into the rest of Europe because they feel emboldened to do so. And then all those shithead countries in the Pacific start becoming very cocky. And they go, well, if Russia did it, we're going to go do it too. Yeah. Taiwan's sitting there going, oh God, you know, like, I mean, that's exactly it. One of the reasons why Lithuania supplies so much to Ukraine is because they know that if Ukraine loses, we're next.
Yeah.
Russia will make an example out of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In one way or the other, whether it's soldiers or whether it's corruption,
Yeah.
they will seep into Europe and they will dominate it. They will either dominate it with soldiers on the ground, or they will the corruption that comes out of Moscow. If they hold on to Ukraine, it'll be a foothold into the European Union.
And the cancer spreads.
And the cancer spreads. It's absolutely. You are a descendant of Lithuanians. Nobody knows this better than people who've lived under the thumb of Moscow. So, you talk about, what is it, your grandparents who never saw Lithuanian
My great-grandparents.
Great-grandparents who never saw liberation. This is, yes, inherently there is a moral obligation to help these people, because Moscow is autocratic, oppressive, corrupt. It spreads and it's cruel and and everything oppressive, and it's all binary and all that power structure. But there's pragmatically also, as we talk about, this is a real threat to global stability.
100%. We've already seen food instability because of it. I mean, obviously we're seeing inflation and everything. Like this has multifaceted effects on everything. But I think that the average person isn't grasping that. And
what's your impression of Ukrainian armed forces? I mean, you're spending time with Ukrainian soldiers. What are they like? What are they fighting for? What do you hear from them?
I have some of my best friends here are amazing fighters that are true patriots and are fighting for their freedom and their country. I mean, that's 100% what it is. They're great, strong, and courageous men. And
women.
And women, yes, absolutely. Thank you. And women. One of the bigger things here is also, though, that the new ones that are coming in are not receiving enough training.
I've heard that.
So, some of them get 3 days, some of them get 3 weeks, and then they're sent to the front. So there needs to be an overhaul in the training system, and they have to at least let them get enough training. But the problem is, when it's a race against time, you can't do that. So it's a double-edged sword. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't, because you need the guys, you need the bodies, you need the men to defend whatever.
When you interact with Ukrainian soldiers, what is your sense of their morale? What is your sense of their general disposition? What their aspirations are?
I mean, obviously they're tired. They're tired. I mean, morale is going to stay high because they know the cost if they don't fight. So, it depends on the circumstances. If you're going to sit in the trench in the middle of winter, your morale's not going to be very high. But as of right now, with all the soldiers that I talk to, morale is good. But that's because of the goal. They're envisioning the greater goal in mind, as opposed to how miserable they might feel in the here and now.
What do you think their sense of our support for them is?
Well, they know that we're there and we're trying to bring them weapons and everything, but I think the problem is those large weapons don't translate that much. I mean, yes, we brought in Bradley tanks, but we trained a couple of units on it. Doesn't work that way, because we can't bring trainers into this country. So we have to let units leave to go train, and that's even harder to do. These guys need to be at the front, but they're going to go train. What? I mean, we're having to buy, as NGOs, we buy hundreds of drones, when that's something I'm pretty sure that could be supplied, but government to government, they're asking just for heavy weapons. So, I mean, there's ammo shortages, there's all kinds of problems with that stuff. They need the smaller ammunition, they need all those things, and they're just not getting it. I've had guys ask me for claymores. I don't have access to that. But because I talk to members of congressional staff, I can pass that on saying, hey, there's a shortage of claymores, there's a shortage of 120 millimeter, they just don't get enough of it.
Do you ever encounter them losing heart? I mean,
especially when they lose their friends, when they lose guys on mission, it's hard mentally. That's, I think, the only time that I ever see them really lose heart. But I think whenever they do lose heart, if it's not about losing a teammate, it's the frustration when they can't get what they need for their unit. Night vision is very scarce. It shouldn't be. You know, it is. The frustration comes when they can't get what they need or when they lose somebody. Usually every other time, they're upbeat and ready to defend their country.
Yeah. It amazes me on a daily basis.
The resilience of the Ukrainian people is like nothing I've ever seen in my entire life, and I admire the hell out of it because it's amazing that you can go on with your life while somebody is actively trying to kill you. Like that is a huge thing that I think a lot of people miss. Like Kharkiv, for example, life is fully like revived in that city. Mm-hmm. But they're constantly getting shelled, but they're still going to restaurants. They're still going to malls. They're still doing it because it's a big fuck you to Russia saying, I know you're trying to kill me, but I'm still going to live my life. I'm not going to be afraid of you.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Like, I respect the hell out of that. And that's what...
And the critics who say that that's an indication that the Ukrainians aren't truly suffering don't have a fucking clue.
It's not, come on. Like, everybody in this country has PTSD. I don't give a shit what anybody says because you have to live with the fact that a bomb could hit your fucking apartment anytime.
Every time you go to bed.
Every time you go to bed. Like that poor little boy.
Wake up?
Poor little boy in Kharkiv. Went to bed. Frickin' missile lands and he's found the next morning wrapped in his blanket. Do you think he went to bed that night thinking, I'm not going to wake up tomorrow? No.
Yeah.
The fuck, man? Or just trying to go have like a funeral luncheon and they bomb the funeral luncheon. Or a frickin' market. Where is the military target?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. So like whenever these guys, like I think one stupid Twitter account who ended up blocking me because I told her she was a fucking idiot because she was like, oh my God, there are people in McDonald's in Kyiv. This is where our tax dollars are going. And I was like, ma'am, if you think that our tax dollars, if McDonald's is getting tax money from us, somebody should be rioting about that because there's no way that McDonald's is government funded. So please check yourself. 1. 2, I'm like, why can't you see that these people are living their life in spite of the fact that someone's trying to kill them?
And on purpose.
With
intent. Yeah. I am going to live my life
absolutely
no matter what you Russians try to do to me. And it's a form of resistance.
100%. And that motivates the hell out of me.
Yeah,
like
me too.
Every day. Even when I feel like I'm just kind of like, and I get like that moment, I go, nope. 1, my friends did not die here in vain. 1. 2, these people are still living in spite of being actively, hunted every day. And 3, if I leave, they win.
Yeah.
And then nobody gets any help.
So what is the future for Rima?
Well, the future is continuing to at least get supplies to anybody that needs them at the front while also working either at a stabilization point or as a medic on a unit. Saving lives is a really important thing, and I know that medics are needed right now. And for me, volunteering and helping people, I always go where I'm needed. It's
incredibly taxing what you're planning to do.
I know the cost, and I know what I signed up for. That's one thing that I've always said to myself is, we know the risk, we know the cost, and we say, for the greater good, for the freedom of others, and so everybody gets to come home. Because everybody gets to come home.
But not everybody is going to come home.
I know, but you can sure as hell try.
Yeah.
It's
what do you think the future is for Ukraine?
Ukraine's going to win this war.
Damn straight.
In my heart and in my bones, I know it. And I think as soon as we do, then the future is bright for Ukraine, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think as long as everybody stays on the right path and remembers and recognizes to remove old Soviet behavior, Ukraine has a fighting chance to be a contender in Europe.
Well, and the blood has to mean something.
Yes,
the loss,
it does.
The tragedy, the trauma.
Does.
It has to mean something.
It
I
does.
run into this all the time with Ukrainians.
Yeah.
That they're not even waiting for the end of the war. They're like, we are not going through all of that. I wonder if you're seeing the same thing.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of that, like a lot of wanting to make sure that the loss is going to stand for something, and people are fighting for that. I see it all the time. They're like, we're going to make sure that none of this is in vain.
What do people need to know? What do folks still need to know? They're being distracted right now by Israel, but what do they need to know about this place, these people, in this war?
Man, if I could impart anything, it would be that the support that they give matters more than they understand. and that the people that are fighting here are not just fighting for Ukraine, but they're fighting for the rest of us, because it's 1776 in Ukraine right now, and we owe it to them to help them gain their, retain their freedom and kick out the occupier, because it will mean so many things for Europe if we don't. And we have to be, these people are resilient. They're good people. They're fighting for what's right. And we've always done that, especially as the United States. We fight for what's right. We fight for the rights of others. And as long as we keep doing that, we keep supporting Ukraine, we're on the right path. There's nothing wrong with supporting freedom and democracy. Nothing. In fact, it's just, and it's what we should do.
Now, it seems to me that Rima is a rather humble person, but it's also very important just her sheer presence here, reminding the Ukrainians that Americans stand with them. And having received at least 2 medals from the Ukrainians themselves, it's clear that the feeling is reciprocal.
Well, thanks for the time. Thanks for doing what you're doing.
Oh man, anytime.
Slava Ukraini.
Heroям slava.
What the?
Anytime.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.